Today we're going to talk about the Canon EOS M and why it may be the best camera for new filmmakers, new videographers on a budget. So let's do this. What's up, YouTube? I'm just gonna say right now, I have 2 layers of pants on. It is very cold, very appropriate for the season, which leads me to the first thing I wanna say, and that is just a happy holidays to you. Thank you guys for carving out a little bit of time out of your day to spend it with me. So thank you very much. I see you. So this video is honestly gonna be a little bit of me eating my own words. If you watched my video from a few weeks ago, I went into this whole thing about why I switched from Canon to Sony and why I switched from the Canon EOS M to buy a Sony a6000. And the universe was just like, yeah, so I'm gonna humble you a little bit. And so, long story short, I basically sold the EOS M to an online dealer. They didn't buy it because there was some adhesive on the LED screen, and so they sent it back to me, which I'll be honest, it was kind of bittersweet because while there were a lot of those frustrations that I mentioned in that video, there were some things that intrigued me about this camera. And so I'm actually really excited to have it back and to be able to talk about it with you all. So I want to take a few minutes to talk about why I think this may be a really good camera for new filmmakers, new videographers, or even new YouTubers that are on a tight budget. So let's get into some pros and cons on the Canon EOS M. Okay, so getting into the pros and cons, I'm actually gonna start the first pro off with one of the cons I had in that original Canon to Sony video, which is the ability to add software to this camera to really unlock its full potential. Now, there's 2 things that I would recommend to add to this camera. One is gonna be CineStyle. I would absolutely load CineStyle onto this camera because it really unlocks that flat profile. If you're trying to make a more high quality video that you can color grade, having CineStyle on this camera is gonna really help for that because it's gonna give you a flat profile that you can go in and color grade how you want in post. So that's one of the first things is CineStyle, but that's a pro for me. That's one of the reasons why I actually missed that camera when I shipped it off was because of CineStyle. So having CineStyle is gonna be really helpful. Now, the other software you can put on it is going to be Magic Lantern. I'm not gonna go into Magic Lantern. I have not used Magic Lantern enough to really speak on it. There are plenty of creators that use Magic Lantern with the Canon EOS M, and I'll maybe put a link to some here in the corner. Zeke is one of them. If you haven't seen any videos from Zeke, he is a huge EOS M enthusiast and uses Magic Lantern, and every time Magic Lantern puts a new version of the software out there, he's pretty much the one that's gonna speak on it first. Having the ability to use software to upgrade this camera to really get its full potential, it is a pro for me because of the fact that I can take this pretty mediocre camera out of box, put this software on it, and that unlocks its true capability. The second pro for me is this little hole on the side. Who'da thunk it? A freaking mic jack. That is one thing that keeps me from using the a6000 more than I do. I cannot stand the fact that I can't put a mic jack on the a6000. The fact that I have this small form, inexpensive camera and could put a mic on it and not have to use like a Sony proprietary mic is just honestly worth its weight in gold. I mean, it's an amazing feature to have a small, inexpensive camera with a mic jack, which is one reason why I potentially recommend this camera for new YouTubers. Now, the only setback for that is the articulating screen, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But having a mic jack, having the ability to put a Rode Video Micro or something like that on this camera, not having to worry about some proprietary microphone that I have to use that I'm kind of pigeon-held into using, is really a great quality for this camera, making it a great camera for new videographers, new filmmakers. So the mic jack, huge feature, huge pro for me. It's one of those small things. It's those small details that get you, and you can tell, hopefully you can tell, and I can relay to you how important that is having that mic jack. Mic jack, like, come on, Sony. You had such a good camera in the a6000 if you just added a mic jack. But then we'd have a a6300. it is what it is. So another pro for me and why I would recommend this for new filmmakers or new videographers is the fact that you can use interchangeable lenses. As you can see, I can easily take off this Helios 442, put on another Canon lens, I can put on this Rokinon lens back here. A small camera at this price with interchangeable lens options, deal breaker. Usually if you have something of this form factor, you're getting a point and shoot, or potentially even at this price range, you're getting a point and shoot, which has potentially like a zoom lens that comes on it, but it's a fixed lens. You cannot swap it out for other lenses. So having something like this that you can interchange the lenses, just amazing. I bought this for $170, and the fact that it's so small and I can put pretty much any lens on this or adapt any lens on this is amazing. But that's another thing, the fact that this is a Canon mirrorless camera, I can put these old lenses on it and cut down the budget just in lenses, right? So that's something to consider when you're buying this camera, is the fact that because it's mirrorless, you can put old vintage lenses on it, which one cuts down cost, but also gives you a different characteristic when you're going and filming, because we all know these old vintage lenses have that characteristic that maybe some of the new, more scientific lenses may not. But then, as I said before, I can also turn around and put this Rokinon Cine lens back here on the camera and rock with that as well. So really, really great. I love mirrorless systems because of the versatility that you can get out of what lenses you can use and things like that. So I see you, Canon. You're trying to win my heart over. Now, another pro for me is the small form factor. Right now I have the Canon EOS M with an EF to EOS M adapter and then the Helios 442 on top of that. But if I take the adapter and the lens off like this is all you're getting. This is such a small body. What that does for you is it allows you to cut down on the size. And that can be both good and bad. It can be bad in the sense of what we talked about last week with handheld videography and handheld filmmaking. The smaller the camera is, or the smaller the rig is, the harder it is to create stable shots. But with this being so small, if I wanted to be more discreet, I could take everything off. Honestly, like, I'm really tempted to buy that 7 Artisans 25 1.8 again, because that created such a small system. I could walk around in places and they not even know I'm filming because I have this almost like literally. So this is my iPhone XR. This is the Canon EOS M. Like, it's such a small camera. Now it's a little bit thicker, obviously. So with that small form factor, I can film in places where I wouldn't normally be able to with like a full frame camera or even a cinema camera. So that's something that also excites me, is if I were to maybe buy that 7 Artisans again, put it on this camera and have a really small system, a really discrete system in certain filming scenarios. So obviously, coming from that Canon to Sony video, you know some of my cons, but I want to reiterate them because obviously they didn't go away. Just because I got this camera back doesn't take away some of the negatives. One of the cons is going to be battery life. This thing has horrible battery life, simply because these batteries are super tiny. And then when you start putting stuff like Magic Lantern on the camera, it is going to drain the battery. So the battery life is awful. So a couple of things I would recommend if you're looking to use this camera for full-time videography or filmmaking is a dummy battery or potentially a V-mount battery to put on your rig, because that will increase your battery life. But honestly, if you're trying to roll with this camera without any type of external battery, make sure you bring extra batteries. I think I have like 5 and I will almost use all of those on a day's shoot. So definitely make sure you have your battery life accounted for. Don't be like me in like a prior video, forget to bring some spare batteries and you shoot everything on 1%. I did that with the A7 III and actually got everything, and I was super impressed. This is not that. So make sure you have extra batteries with you or potentially an external battery that you can use. Another con for me is the lack of articulating screen. I said that in the Canon to Sony video, but it still rings true, right? So it has no articulating screen. The lack of articulating screen is a little bit of a setback, but honestly, not a deal breaker. I do have an external monitor. It just could create a little bit harder of a filmmaking experience if you don't have an external monitor that does articulate. So another con is going to be the lack of slow motion. Now, I said this in the Canon to Sony video, but I want to clarify something. Just because something doesn't have slow motion does not make it less cinematic or less professional. There are a lot of good cameras that don't have slow motion and they are very cinematic. This is something that even I wrestle with. The fact that you see so much slow motion in videos on YouTube and they say they're cinematic, we've gotten to a point where we think that slow motion equals cinematic, and that is not true at all. If you look at movies, a lot of times slow motion helps with dramatic or epic shots, but it doesn't necessarily, you don't see slow motion throughout the entire movie, and there's reason for that. Slow motion is used as a tool to kind of help emphasize your story. It is not the cornerstone of your story. The fact that this camera only goes up to 30 frames per second in full HD is okay. I can still get cinematic footage without slow motion on this camera. And that actually excites me a little bit because I do want to get away from this concept that slow motion equals cinematic. And so I try to shoot more in 24 frames per second, which is kind of that standard for natural motion. So I want to shoot more in actual 24 frames per second rather than 60 or 120 and slowing it down in post. That is a con that there's no slow motion, but I don't want you to think that that's a con and a deal breaker to where you can't use this camera for filmmaking or videography and not look cinematic or epic, because you definitely can. That's my soapbox for the day. We all do it. We all get in this crutch of 60 or 120 frames per second without realizing why. With me, I do a lot of product shots. Product shots by nature rely on a lot of slow motion. It's the way that you kind of make these still objects a little bit more like epic or interesting as you introduce stuff like slow motion or lighting or things like that. But in general, like I said, slow motion does not equate to cinematic and epic footage. I'm sorry. Fight me. Don't fight me. I'm not interested in getting into a fight. And then the last con for me was actually the first Pro that I had, and it's kind of like a weird thing that I'm doing here. The fact that you do have to install software to make this not just a mediocre camera is a little bit of a con for me. I wish that there was more out-of-box features that made this a little bit more of an epic little camera, but obviously maybe more money at that point. So even though that's a con, the fact that I can spend $150 to $200 on a camera body, add a couple pieces of software and make it a really great camera for filmmaking, have a really great image, really great footage is really a selling point. So it's kind of like a weird mental thing that I'm doing with this con. Even though it's a con, it's actually a pro, and I'm genuinely confused about even what I'm saying. So even though it's a con, it's a pro, just buy the camera. As always, I like to give you this, who would I recommend this for? And honestly, the people I'd recommend this for are new filmmakers, new videographers, people that want to get into stuff like YouTube, but don't have a crazy budget. Honestly, if you're starting YouTube on a budget, what I would start with is this, right? Your phone. And I'm actually planning on making a video on how to start a YouTube channel on a budget, so let me know if you're interested in that. But if you're trying to upgrade from your phone, this is a really great camera to consider for the fact that you can change the lens that's on it, you have the mic jack, you have the small form factor, so if you're a vlogger, I mean, this is a really great lens because it's a small setup, you can run around with it. You will barely even notice that you're carrying it around because it's so small and so light. Now you may say, what about the articulating screen? I'm a Sony user. I'm used to not having a fully articulating screen, so I have managed to be able to film YouTube videos without really being able to see myself. Well, now I'm kind of cheating because I have a monitor, but when I started my channel, I didn't have a monitor, and so I really was kind of just doing some test shots, seeing what my composition was, and going with that. Now, that does lead to bad composition sometimes, but it's $150, $200. You really can't beat that, especially having that mic jack and interchangeable lenses. So if you're a new filmmaker, a new videographer, a new YouTuber, and you're trying to move away from just using your phone or like a GoPro or something like that, this is a great camera to check out. Small, inexpensive, and with all those pros that we mentioned. I definitely recommend it for new filmmakers, new videographers on a budget, new YouTubers on a budget, or potentially if you already have all the gear you need for filmmaking or videography, this may be just like a fun project. Putting that Cine style on it, putting Magic Lantern on it, just having fun with it. That's one reason I have it, is it's something to experiment with. You know, if you're looking at some of those crazy shots where you may lose a camera, that's the one. So with all that being said, I hope this answers why I think this may be the best camera for new filmmakers, new videographers, like I said, new YouTubers. And also, if you have any more questions about the Canon EOS M, let me know in the comments below. But that's it. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a like. If you're digging the content coming from the channel, consider subscribing. I think I will keep the small rig multi-tool giveaway open for one more week. So if you want to check out the 7 Artisans 25mm f1.8 video, I'll put it in the corner above. It's so much information. The giveaway is only valid for US subscribers, but make sure you subscribe to the channel, comment on that video, your username for Twitter or Instagram. I'm gonna pick a winner for that contest. I'm gonna tell you who that is on the New Year's Eve video. So make sure you tune in for that next Tuesday. New Year's Eve video. The winner will be determined. So with that being said, go and find your journey, go embrace life, go find a budget camera and make all the films in the world. I'll see you here next time. Peace. I can put these old vintage lenses on them. That's really hard to say. Vintage lenses. I currently have the Helios 442 on the camera, which I broke up there a little bit. The fact that this is a Canon mirrorless camera, I can put these old lenses on it and honestly, I said it, and then I just lost all trains of thought. But with this being such a small camera, I can easily, just like the 8, I just spit. I'm pretty sure, you might not have seen it, but I just spit. Whatever, I'm over it. You'll barely even notice And question of the day, if you're looking at some budget cameras, what's in your eye? What's in your eye? But I've also been able to put, I'm also able to put these old vintage lenses on them. I'm really having a hard time saying this.